Good morning and welcome to day 2 of the Global Gateway Forum. This panel is all about strategizing partnerships with a global perspective. So welcome to those of you who are here in the room joining us, and welcome to those of you who are joining us online. You can always join the conversation with the hashtag Global Gateway. There is interpretation available for you today in several languages. My name is Rosie Burchard. I'm a journalist, and I'm going to be your host for this session, which is all about strategizing partnerships. We're looking at what makes for a sustainable and a strategic partnership in 2025. In my day job, I cover Europe's role in the world, and of course, it's a world which is changing so fast, as we're going to get into with our panelists this morning. What we'll look at is reconciling ambitions with realities, aligning interests, and drawing practical lessons for future cooperation. We're going to start by discussing as a panel, and then we will have some time for questions in the room. So if you hear something which piques your interest, make a mental note and feel free to raise your hand when the time comes. So now let me have the pleasure to introduce you to my panel this morning. So I have here Joseph Sikala, who is the European Commissioner for International Partnerships, leading efforts to deliver sustainable investments under Global Gateway. Commissioner, good morning.
Good morning.
Jorge Moreira de Silva is the UN Under-Secretary General and the Executive Director of UNOPS, which is the UN Office for Project Services. I know you were also previously the Director for Development Cooperation at the OECD. I have Audrey Marks, who is the Minister with responsibility for efficiency, innovation, and digital transformation in the Office of the Jamaican Prime Minister. That's a new portfolio you were explaining to me. So you're building things from the ground up. And I know you were also previously ambassador to the United States. So you'll have some insights to share with us there. We have Deputy Prime Minister of Cambodia, Sokchenda Sopia, who is also former foreign minister and who previously headed up the Council of Development of Cambodia. Good morning, Deputy Prime Minister. And Barry Andrews is a member of the European Parliament who chairs the Development Committee and sits with the centrist Renew Europe group. He was also previously Director General of the Institute for International and European Affairs in Dublin. Let's get into it. So, Commissioner, let me start with you. This Global Gateway Forum, this is your daily bread. You spend your day working to try and make this strategy a reality, to make it better, to make it functional, to make sure it's delivering. So start by talking us through the rationale here. How are you trying to balance geostrategic concerns with credible delivery when it comes to Global Gateway?
Well, I will start a few years ago, and with the collapse of the supply chains after the COVID-19, and with the experience of the world that some of the producers, when basically there is a crisis, they are behaving in a way that they are protecting just their own interest. So we should be frank, some of the companies and productions were staying, not because of COVID in Europe, but because not having spare parts, semiconductors, or even some raw materials. And of course, we were missing some medicals, masks, and basically to get them was extremely expensive. And so the lessons learned were that basically the outsourcing of some of the productions and basically believing that access to a strategic raw materials to some products in like a WTO environment is something what is given. And no. And then basically the second experience, the weaponization of the fossil fuel from Russia. You remember the empty gas storages across Europe rented by Gazprom, then the Russian invasion to Ukraine in February 22, and the blackmailing of Europe like if you would not accept what we are doing, you will freeze. You will be out of gas, out of electricity, out of everything. I remember the commercials in the Russian TV, like showing the frozen villages and hungry people in Europe. And on the other side, we see the huge gap when it comes to sustainable development targets. We see 4 trillion, which looks like an unachievable amount, but of course, if you just count the assets under management, under the management of the biggest asset manager of this planet, you will see that basically just 3 of them can easily basically go heavily above this amount. So I think the 5 biggest, they will account for maybe even 20 trillion plus. So, and then we see that basically with traditional support, despite the fact that Europe has been, the EU and the member state, by far the biggest donor, with 43% annually worldwide, with only 16% of the nominal GDP, that it is not enough. And that some of the countries, the biggest polluters on this planet, are continuing to open coal mines, to produce steel in a very dirty way, and to supply this overproduction to Europe. So basically the necessity to look for a new partnerships, balanced partnerships, equal partnerships where both or all involved parties are gaining a certain benefit, solves a plenty of things. The first thing is that it is a clear commitment of Europe to stick to its values and to continue with the development support worldwide. Why? Because we are investing not only in the hard assets, but also in education, know-how transfer. With this approach, we create the jobs and we create sustainable development in other continents, so we are making them more wealthy, the population, the countries, and this is definitely a good thing, because this is also the reason for the people to stay in their own countries, and this is part of our responsibility to help the countries to tackle the root causes of the migration. But this is also about the future of Europe. This is about the economic resilience and security, because if we will create new partnerships, beneficial partnerships based on the fair trade and fair price, by helping the countries, for example, not only to explore and to ship the raw materials, but to refine them on their own soil, to gain more value from their natural resources, then we will become a natural trade partner, and maybe we can secure some of the supplies through take-off agreements, long-term take-off agreements, where both parties are profiting because they have a secure take-off and we have a certain supply stability guaranteed. And this is basically the idea behind this approach. We have the experience from Russia and crude oil and natural gas. We see that China is meanwhile controlling 70% of the raw materials, critical raw materials processing. And we have to avoid that basically this access, this privileged access to critical raw materials will be weaponized in the future and will used as like a pressure tool against Europe and Europe's citizens and businesses.
So we heard there the why you're doing this. We're going to take some time to diagnose the how, to look at what's coming next. I want to come to the Deputy Prime Minister, Sok. You told me something really interesting before we came on stage here. You said you're really here to listen because you don't learn anything when you're speaking. But I'm going to ask you to speak. Tell us What are Cambodia's priorities when it comes to engaging with the European Union? What's driving it from your side?
Thank you. A very good morning to all of you. I again thanks the EU for inviting Cambodia. Small country, ASEAN, we are 10, soon 11. And I was surprised that you decide to invite one of the smallest country in ASEAN. We are nearly 18 million. Before responding to your questions, and it is really a golden opportunity for me to tell you how we have appreciated the partnership with development partners, with trading partners. Among those, the EU has played a very important role that I like to acknowledge in front of you. What Commissioner Sikela just mentioned, if you allow me to speak in such a way, is really touching me, is music to my ears. He is talking about partnership, strategic partnership. This is the key word that brings us together, and it's the theme of the session. But he defined it also by mutual benefit. You use the word balance. I can say that what the EU have done in Cambodia has helped us to rebuild our economy. You all know about the tragic past of Cambodia. And thanks to this, we are able to participate in the global trade, but in the global affairs. That what I expect from the EU, Cambodia, my response would be not only for Cambodia. I don't know if there are other ASEAN friends in the room, but it's also the partnership between EU and the ASEAN. And this is something important for Cambodia. Although small, but just to tell you, we believe on regional integration and global integration. We worked hard after the war, and we became the last member of ASEAN. Why? We want so much to be integrated, to be part of the game. When you are small, you cannot grow. And when we look at the EU, when we are talking about diversification, it's really, there is really a meaning for us. People look at some countries in ASEAN, including Cambodia, and they make analysis that this country, including Cambodia, many people consider as close to this country. Actually, it's not really true, because, for example, they never said that we are close with the US, but the US is our biggest market for export. Second is the EU. So this openness, this diversification is what we aim at. And coming today is somehow to tell you that Cambodia, part of ASEAN, and ASEAN as a whole, really appreciate and wish this connectivity and partnership with EU for many reasons. I mentioned to you the first one. You took time to build this community. We are now, we have finished the first phase, ASEAN Economic Community in 2025. Now we are aiming at the 2045. And all of us, we look at the EU experience, really. And we appreciate, for example, EU have helped us for the ASEAN single window. In our endeavor to realize the ASEAN economic community, do you know that we are using the EU single market scorecard? Just to say that why? Because we want to deal with EU, so more or less, we try to speak the same language in EU. This is the most important thing that for Cambodia and for ASEAN, because EU represents a good partnership in addition to the diversification of trade.
Thank you so much, Deputy Prime Minister. We heard there a lot about connection. That's, of course, what this forum is all about, and I know that these conversations will continue off stage as well. Now, we promised this panel would be global, so let's go to another part of the world. Minister Audrey Marks, what makes a good partner in 2025, and how confident are you that the European Union and Jamaica's interests can be actually aligned when it comes to delivering on those partnerships?
Thank you, Madam MC, and good morning all. This is actually a very good year for Jamaica and the EU, because it's 50 years of a diplomatic relationship. We established a diplomatic relationship in 1975. So this is a very special time, and we're very happy for the opportunity to be here at the Global Gateway Forum and to speak about our strategic partnerships. We are also looking at this is an opportunity to take stock of the Latin American Caribbean relationship with the EU just before the CELAC meeting next month in Colombia. So overall, it's a very good time and place to review the relationship and to take steps to prepare for the future. For Jamaica, the Global Gateway is another medium to really look at our partnership in some significant areas for our development. First and foremost is our effort to accelerate our digital infrastructure. And this is critical because in many ways that's my responsibility now to build out Jamaica's digital transformation strategy, and in so doing also create more efficiencies in our bureaucracy. So I'm very happy to be here, and because the objectives in Jamaica for our national development, they align there's very good alignment with also the EU's objectives in terms of their partnership globally. And 4 areas that I will highlight are 1, what I mentioned before, accelerate digital transformation and connectivity, particularly in the public space. And secondly, to modernize our infrastructure for resilience and trade. And third, to build data governance frameworks. And 4th, expand digital literacy and innovation ecosystems, particularly innovation and capacity building for public servants and youth. All of these 4 areas are aligned to the EU priority for its global partnerships. So we are expecting that we will be able to make good progress with our National Development Plan objective to have a digital society by 2030. So this is a very important partnership for us to achieve this goal, and also to modernize our infrastructure, especially in the area of our port development. Jamaica sits on the 7th largest natural harbor in the world. And of course, we are always looking for investments to build out our objective of being a logistics hub. And the EU has provided great support as we build out that capacity. And the private sector in the EU have also come on board as partners, and we are looking to expand that. So it's a strong partnership with critical areas of alignment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. Barry Andrews, MEP. I know you've recently been on some trips to Tanzania and to Namibia to look at Global Gateway in action. What can you tell us? What were your takeaways from those trips?
They were really impressive, I have to say. Our committee in the European Parliament, together with the Foreign Affairs Committee, are responsible for interrogating Global Gateway to the best extent possible, you know, to surface the assumptions, the theory of change, the governance. But being on the ground is much better than the things that we do in the committee sometimes. So in both Tanzania and Namibia, we got an opportunity to really see in action the ideas around the leverage of the private sector, the question of job creation. You know, are we aligned in our interests with the interests of the national priorities of our partner countries? So from that point of view, it was very positive. Our committee is also really interested in the paradigm shift that Global Gateway is.
Right.
So we have overseas development assistance, traditional aid, people might describe it as, and this new idea of Global Gateway. And our committee is very concerned to say it's not an either or, that it is important that there are countries at an even earlier stage of development where overseas development assistance is absolutely vital. And the Commissioner referred to this in his opening remarks. Sustainable development is so important. And there is, so this shift is important. We've changed from development cooperation to international partnership. And I was just thinking yesterday, my wife is my partner, but sometimes she'd prefer cooperation to partnership. But the paradigm shift is important. And I think that we have to remember that there is, however, commonality. So for a long time, ODA was considered to be only motivated by altruism. But in fact, there is a huge amount of mutual interest in overseas development assistance. Over the course of the last few months, there have been several publications which show that the amount of overseas development assistance from the European Union is exactly matched by increase in exports that are caused by the impact of EU aid. That's the first example. The second is from the Kiel Institute, not known for its soft liberal assessments, but it also demonstrated a theory of mutual interest in overseas development assistance, particularly in areas like aid for trade, particularly in areas like security and instability, and also in the area of health. So I think what's really important is that as we evolve and develop Global Gateway, we also remember that really important mutual interests for the European Union and our partner countries can be achieved through ODA. So I think we need to maintain both of those over the next few years.
Thank you very much. So I think from what you've heard, it was really positive messages there, but let's not pretend that there are no difficulties to overcome here. And I think let's pivot a bit with Jorge Moreira da Silva, Executive Director of UNOPS, because getting things done is part of what you do every day, right? We use this word implementation. That is basically going from the idea to making it happen. So in your experience, where are the bottlenecks? What is preventing better implementation when it comes to these partnerships?
Thank you. First of all, I would like to congratulate the European Commission for the convening capacity and the mobilization that we have seen in these days. I was telling Commissioner Sikela that was extremely impressed by the number of heads of state and government and ministers that attended this discussion. And indeed, before I go into the problems, if you allow me, Rosie, indeed the global partnership has represented a paradigm shift from aid to partnership, from poverty to poverty and sustained development, from donor-recipient approach to a truly partnership approach. And the fact that the Global Gateway is focused on infrastructure is key. UNOPS is the UN agency focusing on infrastructure, procurement, project management on the ground. We work in 130 countries. And what we see is precisely the need to focus on infrastructure. 92% of the SDGs, the 17 goals and the 169 targets and 232 indicators, 92% of the targets can only be met with a focus on infrastructure. So without infrastructure, we won't succeed on the SDGs. This is a research from UNOPS and from Oxford University. In the same research, we concluded that 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions are correlated with infrastructure. So unless we focus on infrastructure, we won't succeed on SDGs and won't succeed on the climate action. That's why the fact that Global Gateway is focused on infrastructure is so important. But then, when you are saying, what are we missing? What are we seeing on the ground that represent bottlenecks? And I'm not talking about Global Gateway, but more broadly about the development landscape.
Sure.
We tend to discuss in many forums the finance gap and the policy gap. We missed the 4.2 trillions, and we need enabling context, so we need structural reforms to attract investment. This is most of the conversation that is taking place in international forum. What I see on the ground, being a UN agency on the ground, is that we are dealing not just with two gaps, the policy gap and the financing gap, but we are dealing with a third gap, which is the capacity for implementation. I know many places where the finance is available and where governments have put in place structural reforms, but then something is blocking or at least undermining the implementation.
What is it?
What is it? Project preparation, project design, technical assistance, capacity building, procurement, localization, community engagement. So these kind of elements are fundamental. I know that it's, I wouldn't say boring, but it's less attractive than talking about the trillions. Maybe it's less attractive than talking about the policy. But indeed, look, unless we create the capacity, we partner on capacity building, on technical assistance, on project preparation, we won't be able to make the projects bankable. And that's why it's so important that Global Gateway is based on this marketplace, because it's an idea that is not just providing aid, is a truly partnership. I'm particularly worried with the market failures. When I look into the formidable potential that we have in the private sector, civil society, I see that the issue is not really the finance. We have $500 trillion available in the financial market, pension funds, in the private sector. We miss 4.2 trillion. ODA is a bit more than 200 billion. So we can look into the fact that the 4 trillion represents 20 times more than ODA, but we can also flip the coin and see that, well, but there are $500 trillion available. So what are we missing? And again, I insist on the policy and on the capacity. But there are market failures. What keeps me awake at night is the fact that 25% of the people live in conflict, and the financial flows and the support can't go just to the easiest or to the place where it's easier to spend fast. We need to address fragility. Conflict-affected countries, fragile contexts. These are contexts where it is fundamental to prioritize action. On climate, I'm worried with the grid. Renewable energy, fantastic development, but then there are areas like storage and grid. Climate adaptation, social sectors. So we are dealing with some sort of uneven effort where the role of the states, the role of international organization, the role of the European Commission, it's so important. So the private sector alone won't be able to address some of the market failures. We need governments, we need public sector, private sector, civil society. That's why I think that Global Gateway is a formidable initiative, because it managed to bring all us together. Thank you.
And we definitely are going to spend some time talking about to what extent it has managed to bring those different elements together. Deputy Prime Minister, I want to come to you to ask you about how you think Global Gateway can achieve this goal of reinforcing genuine and inclusive partnerships. You spoke in your last answer about sometimes being described as close to one country or close to another. The European Union says it wants to be the partner of choice. One criticism I've heard from the other side of the argument is, why do I have to choose, right? I'm wondering why are you choosing the European Union? Do you feel forced to choose? What do you think is, what could make an inclusive and a genuine partnership here?
I like to echo what Mr. Barry Andrew has mentioned. Cambodia was a recipient of ODA, and not only we received that, but it has allowed us to be able to produce. And as a matter of fact, as I mentioned, the EU is a very important market for us, for governments. It's famous for that, but also for our agricultural product. Coming back to the Global Gateway in general, I didn't mention it. Minister remind me that what we are pleased with the Global Gateway is that it's totally aligned with our own priorities.
Okay.
Infrastructure, connectivity, energy, and we do that in era of digital, and we have always in mind sustainability. I have to mention this. Thank you, Minister. Then the second point that I have learned from the Global Gateway, this innovative possibility of blend financing.
Okay.
You see, you were mentioning about policy and this, that, but the real problem is implementation. I agree. But for what we are aiming at, we wish the EU you are mentioning about infrastructure. The idea is there, but the problem is the financing to make the idea a reality. And Global Gateway come up with this possibility of blend financing. I really appreciate this because in many fields, government, singular, or governments, plural, are doing a great job, paving the way. But with no visibility, private sector will not jump in. I don't invent anything, but I listened carefully to Commissioner Sikela yesterday, and he was saying that the private sector just want to do something, but they need two things. They need information, and they need to who to ask for. This is so true. But you have done the Global Gateway. I'm confident that there are investors, not only from the EU, but we are here to talk to them. They will be encouraged to put the money to join governments to undertake those projects for the benefit of, on one hand, the EU and the other side. So I cannot say better than in this troubled time. I will not repeat about tension because we all know that it's so refreshing that today we are not talking about reshoring, friendshoring, nearshoring. Instead, we are thinking very positively, constructively on the way how we can better work together, have a better partnership, balanced partnership, and this is really for me what I would take away from the Global Gateway. I was not very familiar. Cambodia received, we have 3 flagships, one on dealing with education, very important, the first one. Second is water, and the third with health, all important. But all in all, I hope that all the initiative that has been already in place, already launched, will encourage the private sector to come on board. I thank you. Thank
you very much. Minister Audrey Marks, you talked a lot about digitalisation. It's in your portfolio. It's also part of the... Commissioner, if you don't mind, I'm just going to grab your mic. Thank you very much. Partnership in action here, as you can see. Minister, we were talking about digital transformation. It's part of your portfolio. It's also part of what the EU and Jamaica work on together. Where do you think you could see an improvement in that area or others? I mean, are you noticing barriers? And one thing I think many of us are really interested in is when we talk about Europe trying to be a partner of choice, how, when you're looking at your global partnerships, what are you factoring in? How does Europe compare to other partners? Thank you.
Well, as I mentioned before, we have had a long and successful partnership, for 50 years with the EU. And the Global Gateway is such an important medium to now push this partnership with some practical outcomes. And let me just pause to commend Commissioner Sikala and the Team Europe for achieving your fund objective, 2 years before your target time, because that is also of critical importance, as Deputy Prime Minister mentioned, when we can have access to financing to do some of the critical infrastructure work, like what we're planning to do in Jamaica, in terms of creating a digitally enabled society. We do need financing and partners with the know-how. And so from here, I actually go on to Estonia, a member of the EU, who have shown the way for small developing countries to utilize digital technology to leapfrog their development strategies. So I see a consistent partnership that is of benefit to our region with the EU. And the other thing that I want to mention, the EU, and I'm here because of the invitation from Commissioner, and it was pushed along by the EU ambassador in Jamaica and in the region. There's a continuous engagement going on by the EU representatives around the region for more positive engagement. There's an encouragement to listen to both the government and the private sector to come up with strategies for engagement. So there's mutual respect and understanding that we can have local goals and objectives in a global setting, and they can be aligned. So we're very pleased with the relationship.
Okay. Barry Andrews, MEP, I want to ask you about any barriers you've noticed and how to overcome them, institutional, political. I mean, one thing I wondered is in the European Parliament, you're chairing the Development Committee. Do other members of the European Parliament care? Is this a hard sell?
No, it's not a hard sell. Do they care? I mean, we are A year ago, President von der Leyen challenged the commissioner to move from startup to scale up.
Right.
So I think in that evolution, very dynamic situation. I mean, today and yesterday, and the Global Gateway Board, we really are moving up in terms of bringing it to the attention of people in the Parliament. I think that's important to point out. I think the challenges that are now ahead of us are absolute clarity of purpose in terms of what the Global Gateway is. The background paper to this forum identifies 3 pillars and recommends the 3rd pillar. So, and I wouldn't disagree with that, by the way. I think it's really, but we have to have that absolute clarity of purpose within the Parliament, within the Commission, within the delegations in our partner countries, and then the private sector and our partner countries can then also be able to understand it exactly what it's for and how it, and secondly, I think we have to look at the governance of Global Gateway as it moves from startup to scale up. Equally, the duty of our institutions, including the Parliament, as I mentioned before, to test the theory of change, to test the assumptions, to test the implementation and the impact is really going to also go up. So the governance of the Global Gateway at EU level is going to have to increase. And I think that we have to sharpen the financial instruments. It was really interesting to hear both the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister Marks talk about capacity building. And while guarantees are a proven method, we also have to have grants and blended finance so that we can help with project preparation, with capacity building at public service and state level, in order to be investable and mitigate the risks associated with investment on the parts of the private sector. So I think these are some of the challenges that lie ahead, but yeah, I think we're making extreme progress in all of these headings.
I'm going to invite Commissioner Sikala to come in there. So we had a couple of comments on sharpening financial instruments, having a better clarity of purpose, your job of moving from startup to scale up. Do you want to come in on what you've heard so far?
There are so many great ideas, and I like the panel. And Barry, I like your English, it's so much better than mine. but really allow me to comment. The first, Excellency, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, thank you for the kind words about the level of cooperation between EU and your beautiful country. But there is one thing. You are not a small country. So first of all, you are a big country. Look, I am coming from a country with 10.5 million people.
Which is already quite big for the EU, let's be honest.
Ranked number 10 population-wise in Europe, in European Union. Yeah. So your country with 17.8 will rank, even if I count Russia to Europe, I do not count Russia to Europe because this dictatorship doesn't have anything to do with European values. But even if I count Russia, then you will be ranked in the whole Europe somewhere around 10, 11, yeah, population-wise. But you have the voice, and you have a strong voice, and your voice in the UN, protecting the rule of law, protecting the multilateralism, is the same as the voice of a big country. Take the example of Pacific, 0.2% of the population, 7% of the voices. So we need to team up all the countries protecting rule of law in order to protect this platform, this foundation of democracies, of rule of law, of multilateralism, and of trade, because only this is the way how to succeed, and all the alternatives. You know, this is like with the climate change. Sometimes we are maybe perceived as a weak, but you know, the difference, the result of Europe, yeah, 20 among the top 30 most developed countries based on the Human Development Index. This is not coincident that 20 of them are European countries, because in the history of Europe, after the Second World War, we had plenty of great politicians which were taking care not only to be re-elected, but with a forward-looking thinking, yeah? Simply to strive for the things which will have impact for the generations to come. The idea of European Union is one of them. And to be very honest, the alternatives I can offer to you, this policy of power, this weaponization of the natural resources, the plundering of least developed countries, this is a very dystopic way in my eyes. So I think we have to continue with this, and we were talking about a partnership. Why should Europe become a partner of choice? How you select your partners? Not because somebody is pushing you. This is and we want to come with a value proposition which is simply much better than the proposition of the others. And
Is it working?
I think it is working. To be very honest, I don't like the current geopolitics, but it's playing in basically our favor. Because the countries which do not want to accept the policy of powers, which do not want to accept tariffs, barriers, blackmailing in the business as the only one option, they are basically, I think, seeking for this reliability, sustainability, predictability, and this is for what Europe, may be sometimes slow, is typical for. We have our standards, but we are predictable, we are reliable, and we stick to our promises. And this is also in the partnership. The partners, usually, regardless if it's good friends or spouses, they are not entrapping you. They are not imposing. Yeah? You have them because you can rely on them, you trust them, and they can rely on you. And this is how the things works. And they are not pushing you to do the things which can damage you. And this is basically the concept. And private sector, growth. We are desperately looking for growth. And for you, yeah, Europe now, okay, flattish, but the growth is coming from the continents of our partner countries. And if we really create more investment-friendly environment, then we can grow together. This is the first thing. The second thing is we can help with the clean industrialization. We are complaining that we are reaching the marginal costs when we are talking about decarbonization in Europe. Yes, but let's allow the European companies to help with the clean industrialization. With a decarbonization, there are countries still opening coal mines and producing plenty of things in a very dirty way. So let's avoid this. We can jump it over in continents like for example, Africa, or in some Asian countries, helping with electrification, helping with sustainable transport, with the public e-mobility, and. So basically, there are huge growth opportunities for both, for the local businesses, and this is extremely important. The local business should be always involved. We are sometimes hearing from the politicians from partner countries, yeah, but the China will be faster. Yeah, if you work with cash or with loans, and if you come with your local workers to a country, not leaving a know-how, not educating, you can be extremely fast. But I'm calling all the politicians from our partner countries to think about if it is not better to be slightly slower, but to have a learning curve, to have an education for your people, to have a training which can be then used in the future. Thank you.
Is it better? Is it better to be slower?
I cannot help but confirm among the 3 flagships that are in place at the moment under the framework of the Global Gateway, there is one on water, clean water. They provide the financing. We have to mention that it's AFD, so the French will be happy. But there is another dimension, they train people. I'd like to confirm this. What Commissioner mentioned is true. Some countries, I don't mention, and they bring their own workers. And here, they help us for the clean water, and they train our people. This is perfect. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Something that keeps coming up is this question of the private sector, how to better engage the private sector. I'd love to talk a bit about the idea of trying to make some risk-sharing mechanisms so that you can unlock larger private investment. Undersecretary General, Executive Director of UNOPS, Jorge Moreira da Silva, is that something you can speak to?
Well, I worked before this function at UN. I was at OECD, working on development cooperation, leading the DAC Secretariat. And at the time, we created the first global standards on blended finance and also on impact investment. And now that I'm on the ground, I see the paradox, which is even when we blend, even when we go faster blending and fostering impact investment, we still see an uneven allocation. So the inconvenient truth is the following. Just blending is not sufficient. We have to make choices. Look, blended finance is on the rise. But when you dig, you realize that only 12% of blended finance goes to low-income countries. Only 7% goes to social sectors like education and health. You realize that despite the efforts and the drive on sustainable finance, 97% of sustainable finance is hosted in high-income countries. 10% of foreign direct investment, only 10% of foreign direct investment goes to fragile context. What I mean is the following. It's not sufficient to talk about blending, going from billions to trillions, getting the private sector. It's fundamental to fix some market failures. And that's why, for me, it's so important that the Global Gateway has decided to focus also on education and health, not just on the traditional infrastructure sectors. Because the choice that the Commission has made, the European Union has made, in tackling broadly infrastructure, including the support on health and education, is crucial. It's a choice. What I mean is the governments, the international organizations can make choices to enable the private sector to operate more efficiently. And I think that just looking to the speed meter, it's not good enough. You know, one of the things that I'm worried about is when we talk about the trillions, you know, going from the billions to the trillions, reaching $6 trillion per year on climate, 5 trillion on energy, etc. We may be tempted in spending fast, but impact is fundamental. I think that the spending of the finance is not the criteria or the aspirational goal. It's impact.
And how that's measured. How do you measure that impact?
Let me give you one concrete example about my organization. We decided in UNOPS to change the way we measure. We will no longer focus on outputs, we will focus on outcomes. So the idea is, rather than counting the number of schools that we construct, or the number of hospitals, or the kilometers of road, now we really want to know from our projects how many kids have access to education, rather than the number of schools. How many people have access to health, rather than the number of hospitals. Because the fact that you put people at the center of development, it obviously helps getting the best projects with the right capacity. So I like very much the fact that the Global Gateway is also prioritizing this idea of impact, measuring outcomes rather than outputs.
For all of my panelists, you feel free at any point if you want to chip in. If there's something that really piques your interest, you have a microphone. I know most of you are politicians, past and present, and you know how to respond. But I want to bring in Minister Audrey Marks. Just to what you've heard so far, we've been talking a bit about scaling partnerships, engaging the private sector. Do you have any best practices to share, or any ideas for untapped potential when it comes to what you're seeing on the ground and the conversations you've been having here in Brussels?
Oh, yes, sure. You know, Jamaica, from our perspective, we have seen, and my background is actually in the private sector.
Yeah.
And we have seen where investors from Europe and from global investors in Jamaica as a small country have really shown tremendous returns. And so one of the first things I'd want to share is that even smaller countries can be a very profitable market, and they can also be a gateway for a region.
Right.
And with all that is happening in the world now, we are encouraging deeper penetration in the South market, like in the Caribbean and Latin America. And I want to also share that for Jamaica, we have come from a situation where our debt to GDP was about 150%. And we have put in a program of stabilization, and we have now managed to get to 62% of debt to GDP. So we have now made a pivot from stabilization to growth, as Commissioner you mentioned. That's our big focus now. And for us to get to growth, we are seeking partnerships and more investments, and being very open for business. So we have put in quite a few very favorable framework for international investments. And I think this is a time for us to, for companies in Europe to look at the Caribbean for expansion of their global trade, because there's a ready market and we're open for business.
Open for business, that's a very clear message. Commissioner, tell us, so then what is the Commission actually doing to allow companies to engage more deeply? I know that you've also worked in the private sector and you have a background as a trade and industry minister, so it's something you must know well, where these kind of, the challenges of balancing private sector and public sector interests. Your microphone.
Of course, this is like both side responsibility. Sometimes I'm visiting countries and presidents and prime ministers are asking me, when you will bring new investments to my country? And I'm telling them, it's up to you.
Is it?
Yes, very often yes, because we can help with the governance, with the e-governance. We can help with the legal environment. We can, of course, talk about investment protection treaties and. But there is very often plenty of work on the side of our partners. But this is co-creation. On the other side, we can help our companies to eliminate certain risks. We can help with guarantees. We can help to support our investments with investments in the soft assets, yeah, education, healthcare, something what might not make commercially sense, but what makes sense for the receiving country and what makes sense in the long term also for the labor market in the receiving country. We can help with the currency hedging. We can help with the interest rate hedging, with the currency hedging in countries, and we have the instruments where we are taking the commercial risk on us, because there is not the mid-term and long-term availability in the local currency, but we need a local currency for making the transaction, let's call it in commercial terms, bankable or feasible. And this is important not to entrap. I was banker, and I was a very successful banker because the majority of the loans, or the prevailing part, I've granted to our borrowers were repaid, because this is your also responsibility not to entrap your partners by loans they are not able to repay. Because if you do this, then it can be by purpose, simply to collateralize. So there is a responsibility to say this is grant and this is something we give you to support a thing, and this is a loan, and the loan should be granted because there is a business case. Maybe not a big money behind it, but basically a cash flow which will at least cover the installments and maybe the not supported part of the interest. So basically this is the way. Of course, this is also about dialogue, what is good for your country, and on the other side, is it in line with our values, with our principles? It is a sustainable investment, because we will definitely not invest in basically projects which will worsen the CO2 output of the country. On the other side, we have to support sustainable agriculture, the food industry in many of countries, because this is an issue. And we should not forget the small and mid-sized companies. We were talking...
Because I have heard that criticism about Global Gateway before, that there's a fear from some campaigners that the investment will go to bigger companies and miss out these smaller businesses.
Yeah, but I was an architect of basically financing program for the SMEs in 10 European countries. SMEs are the backbones of economies, and in many of countries, the biggest employer. And their investment multiplicator is much higher, because they tend to reinvest in their own country. So whatever they earn, they are reinvesting back in the country where they do the business. And they are extremely important, because for the global players, like electrification of small parts of the country, so simple agribusiness, this is not for them. So of course we have to make accessible the global gateway programs, also for the European SMEs, but also for the local SMEs, because with the local SMEs we will build the foundation of economy in the partner countries.
Commissioner, I can see Barry Andrews, MEP, was wanting to jump in there.
Well,
Go ahead.
I mean, I don't want to have a debate with an expert on banking, on debt management and mitigation of risk. And it is important to say that for banking, the most important thing is the repayment of the debt. But for the European Union, there are political risks, there are compliance risks, there are other risks that we are trying to mitigate in our policies. And and just to say as well that one of the open conversations that are going on, and touching upon what the Commissioner said earlier on, was that, and in Tanzania and Namibia, is this question of the conditionality that Europe brings. A big, long checklist saying, well, you have to be aligned with the Paris Agreement, you have to be aligned with sustainable development, you have to do this, whereas other potential offers, let's just build it, and we don't really worry about any of that. So that's the paradox at the center of it, because I was in Nigeria recently, where they've had democratic elections since 1999, transitions of power. The economy is growing. However, there are deficits in the rule of law. And I think Nigeria has to reconcile, on the one hand, how do we get investment in if we're not really investing in rule of law and governance and making sure that there are, judicial independence, media freedom, all of these indicators. So while Europe does come with this checklist, it is, in my opinion, and I say an open conversation, is really in the towering interest of those partner countries.
I think the Commissioner made that point really well as well. I think that's the point. I just wanted to elaborate that point, because it's something I've very much noticed in the partner countries that I've been working in. I saw some nods, some nodding over here as well. Deputy Prime Minister, did you want to come in on that idea? No, okay. Very good.
May I say one word on this point that Barry just made? This is a marketplace. There is a Global Gateway, there is Belt and Road, there are South-South Cooperation, there is Blue Dot, there is lots of initiatives. And that's good, because not all initiatives are the same. So in this marketplace, partner countries and developing countries, they choose. And this is good, because not everything is the same. So I see lots of differences on the way that partnerships are being developed. I must underline one important element that Commissioner Sikela made, which is this element of rules-based transparency, the fact that a global gateway is very much rooted on mutual accountability, localization, results-based, I think it's very important. There is one word that disappeared almost completely from international discussions: aid effectiveness. I think it's important that we go back to Busan and we check what is there in terms of aid effectiveness, development effectiveness, which is local aspirations, results-based management, mutual accountability, because we must not lose sight that we are here to support the people in need, and therefore the agenda is there, is the local aspiration. From my experience, it never works when someone goes to a country and imposes in that country an agenda from the supply.
Right.
When a company goes to another country and just exports a technology or a product. What works is when there is this partnership, and I like very much the fact that in this room we have private sector from the north and from the south. The idea that you are, through the Global Gateway, enabling this partnership, not just between the Commission and Team Europe and the partner countries, but you are also enabling partnerships between companies from the north and from the south. And this is crucial, because unless we do it, we won't succeed on the real impact.
Absolutely, crucially important. I know, Commissioner, you want to come back in on some of those points, but will you allow me to open to the room for some questions, and we can see if we can get some of those other points on private sector in there. So I can see already, I have some colleagues that are going to come around with microphones. There is a gentleman here in the third row who was first with his hand up, and a colleague is coming to give you a microphone. So could you please introduce yourself and tell us to whom you're addressing your question?
Thank you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Christophe Yvetot. I represent the United Nations Industrial Development Organization to the European Union. I'd like first to congratulate the Commissioner for the fantastic opening session yesterday of the Global Gateway with a very good statement from the various countries. What we see in our report, because we have industrial statistics in the last decades, is that the biggest way of lifting people from poverty has been industrialization. You see Asia, lifting in the last 30 years 1 billion people out of poverty. Yesterday we had the Vice Prime Minister of Vietnam explaining how in the last 20 years his country's revenue per capita moved from $80 to 2,000. Oh no, 5,000, sorry. And I think Cambodia is 1,000 to 2,400, something like this. So this is very powerful. So what I heard yesterday from the head of state, all of them, they wanted to have more production at home. What I heard from Mrs. von der Leyen and from the Commissioner is that the Global Gateway wants to support that, because European industry needs the raw material. But why not sharing a bit more the value addition? And through local jobs, people can have access to higher salary and a better life. I would like to thank also the Commissioner, because yesterday, together, we signed an important agreement with other partners on the Lobito corridor and how youth and women in Zambia will be able to add value to their critical material that are from their soil. So, if I understand correctly, and Mrs. von der Leyen, in her speech on the status of the Union, talked about with Ukraine of a joint industrialization. Isn't it that the gateway is a way to do joint industrialization with the rest of the world for joint prosperity?
I'm just going to take one or two more questions while we're here. So there's over here, if we could get a microphone. Thank you very much. Oh, fantastic. Look at this, again, partnership in action, connections. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. My name is Geraldine Smith. I'm the vice chair of EBON. It's an organization that we group 60 European chambers across the world. We have full representation in Asia, so in Cambodia. We have 20 European chambers in Africa, and we are growing the network in Latin America. I hear a lot speaking about civil society, but we never mention business support organizations.
Okay.
A lot of people think that we are the same, and in fact we are not. Because we are not, we have another view, we have another way of working. I think it's really important to help European companies to invest and to retake what was said is those European companies are going to be there to make and to help the local government to make changes. How can we say to a government, you need to change certain rules if we don't have investment? If we don't give something like jobs to that country? In my special case, I'm in Argentina, and I go with the government saying, we have 800 European companies. This represents so much % of the GDP. And that makes me being here and making changes in those countries.
And so is your question, how can we better listen to business support organizations?
We need to be listened. We need also to be listened as European companies in third markets.
Right.
Because we know how to do it in those markets.
Thank you very much. We're going to keep that as well. Was there another question? Yeah, okay, so we have a gentleman here. Thank you so much for helping out.
Thank you. Alexander Schwab from Antritts Hydropower and member of the Business Advisory Group. I have heard in the last 2 days, so yesterday and today, quite a lot about what Global Gateway is doing and what it has done. Coming from the private sector, we normally also have a midterm strategy, a long-term vision in order to move forward. I would have a very simple question to the panel. What do you think Europe, international partnership and Global Gateway will look like in 5 or 10 years?
Thank you very much. So we'll be asking our panelists to gaze into their crystal balls there. And I think there was one last question, just gentleman right up the back there. So as you can see, we're making our colleagues get their steps in. Thank you so much for your patience, sir. So could you tell us who you are and to whom you're addressing your question?
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm Gabriel Duque from the trade section of the Colombian mission to the EU. I have a question for Commissioner Sekela and for MEP Andrews, specifically regarding this spirit of partnership. How do you reconcile it with the unilateral imposition of standards and somehow trade barriers in regulations like the EU EDR or the CSDDD or the mirror clauses that appear sometimes in the set of new regulations that the EU is putting forward? So my question is, how do you reconcile this with this spirit of building actual partnership with this? It somehow relates to the conditionality question. So thank you very much.
May I just first part of the question?
Let me just give you your microphone. Please go ahead.
The first part of the question, I didn't catch what I should reconcile. Yeah, but you were talking about AAA or...
I think it was unilateral imposition of standards and reconciling that with saying that you want to meet someone on eye level.
That's
okay.
right, exactly. It's unilateral imposition of standards through regulation in the spirit of partnership, building partnership, long-term partnership with other countries.
Okay. Gotcha.
Do you want to continue, Commissioner, over here? So we had a question on business support organizations, on joint industrialization, on your future vision, and on this question of reconciling what may seem like unilateral conditions with this idea of eye-level partnership.
Well, I think about joint industrialization, we are talking during all 2 or for me already 3 days, because, and you mentioned it, the crucial issue is to leave as much value in the countries of origin. I think the Namibia is a great example where in a country perfect for renewable resources. Plenty of space for solar panels, strong wind, cold nights, fog coming from the sea and basically splashing the dust, in the night from the panels, so you don't need to clean them. So you can really produce plenty of very cheap electricity, and the idea is to use the iron ore now in Namibia, but maybe later on also in Mauritania and in South Africa for production of the directly reduced iron. So in this process, you use 2/3 of the energy you need for production of a high-quality steel in the place where you have a very cheap energy. And then instead of shipping the iron ore, you ship only the sponges, the pellets, which are then being processed in the electric arc furnace and produced the high-quality steel. So this is one of the ways how to help create jobs, value chains, and how to help with a clean industrialization, so needed in the continent where the industrial output represents only less than 2% worldwide. It's not bearable for the future when we really want to create the jobs. The second was...
We had a question about better involve or listen to the voices of business support organizations, and one about just your future vision. I mean, you can comment on any of these. Yeah, I won't pin you down on every single...
Believe me that I spent 30 years in business, and since I moved to politics and the policy making, I am regularly listening to businesses. Sometimes they are using me as a hub, to share their ideas with less business experienced politicians. So I fully agree with you that we need also like advisory and external support, because sometimes the businesses tend to protect only their own industry. Sometimes they are a little bit selfish and protecting only their own company. So basically the view from the balcony, basically dealing with like an industrial view, but with like a macroeconomic view is very important, especially when it comes to policies, regulations. And here I am back. Yeah, we have our standards, but, and we are sometimes slightly basically protecting our standards because we believe that this is also beneficial for the counterparty, because standards and quality matters in the long term, and matters mainly when it comes to nature and climate protection. So when we talk about mining and extraction, then it should be based on the most modern standards and not like 40 years old technologies, because there is a huge difference and a huge progress. And when it comes to like a real rating or debt capacity of the countries, and this is extremely important, and this is what I wanted to talk about.
Go ahead.
That the product, you never, as a responsible investor or banker, you never should offer a product which is threatening your client, your partner. I remember when once, in my former activities, the product team came to me and we will launch a new product on the market in one of the countries. I was a CEO. And I was looking on the interest rate, and it was 30%. And I asked, who will take the loan? This is like a consumer loan. So the smart people, financially educated, they will not take it. And why is the interest rate so high? And they told me, yeah, because we expect high defaults So we have to create provisions to cover these defaults. And I was simply asking, no, we will not do this. Yeah? So we can work with this product if basically the interest rate will be not higher than 10%. And by basically reducing the interest rate, we are increasing the accessibility and reducing the probability of the default. And if we are not able to calculate it, we should not offer this product. Because
and I suppose that's the whole...
and this is, I was talking about, this is the interest rate. We don't strive for 25 or 30% return on equity. We have our EIB, equity-wise, the real firepower of the European Union, yeah, is the lending capacity is bigger than all the three biggest Asian development banks together. And we don't need to, basically, we just need to lend and to get basically the installment back, and we can work with the interest rate hedging, with the currency hedging, to help to decrease the risk, not only for our institutions, but also for the borrowing country. And this is the approach we want to offer.
So there you have it, that's the pitch. Deputy Prime Minister, do you want to comment on any of those points there? So perhaps this future vision for partnerships, or this idea of the accusation that there's a kind of unilateral imposition of standards. Your microphone is just there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. To give you the floor for the last time, I have mentioned it already. I believe on this strategy, the global gateway, and I hope that the private sector believe in it also. Because at the end of the day, I know what I'm talking. I was in charge of investment for so many years.
Yeah.
And what the global gateway, the merit for me is that it creates a lot of visibility for the private sector to make decisions. And second, I also applaud the idea of partnership, not only the EU with ASEAN, but definitely I wish to see partnership between EU private sector and ASEAN private sector.
Yeah.
And in the case of Cambodia, you can testify that our government engaged with the European Chamber of Commerce, and they are producing, just as an example, the last one was in 2024, they are producing a white book. Believe me or not, they keep telling us what they wish to see, and year after year, we have not responded to all their wishes, but by listening to them and by doing what we can do, definitely the business environment has improved.
Fantastic.
This is what I'd like to tell you.
Thank you for sharing that. Minister Audrey Marks, would you like to come in on perhaps the idea of a future vision? We're getting to the end of our session now, so it would be good if you give us some of your thoughts on what you've heard so far.
I was going to do...
Sorry, go ahead.
Do a closing now?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Do the closing remarks now?
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, you know, I see the Global Gateway as a cooperation facility that is actually encouraging a virtuous cycle in terms of creating expanded global trade while focusing on sustainable development in the markets in which it is encouraging the trade. And so I like what the Commissioner said in terms of, you know, the blended finance help encourage, minimize risks to certain investors so that they can expand more and invest more in developing countries. And in so doing, as we get more investments, we can become better markets for European products while encouraging more jobs and capacity building in our countries. So I see continued growth and development in this relationship. And I would also close by saying that Jamaica stands as a ready and reliable partner in advancing a globally connected, digitally empowered and sustainable future alongside the European Union through an expanded cooperation with Global Gateway, especially in the areas of digital public infrastructure and data governance, green climate resilient transport and energy systems, and of course, innovation and capacity building for public servants and youth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. Barry Andrews, MEP, do you want to respond to some of these questions that we had here? And this is the last time that I'll come to you, so feel free to bake in your final thoughts as well.
Okay. So on the question about the chambers, the business advisory group is really core. I mentioned earlier about governance, and I think we need to scale that up. Gentlemen from the business advisory group will know that Commissioner von der Leyen was at the business advisory group during the week, and the EU delegations in our partner countries are bound to try to appreciate the knowledge and experience of the Euro chambers that are present in partner countries. I think it's really important. I've seen it in action. The question around is this an imposition somehow? And you referred to the CSDDD. Let's just be clear. That directive requires responsible disengagement. So it's only as an absolute last resort that we would have a situation where supply chains would have to be, that we'd have to bring an end to some relationships. We don't have time really to discuss that, but I think you've heard from our partners here up on the stage and throughout this forum that there is an appetite for the European offer, there is an appetite for capacity building, for compliance, for governance and generation in that regard. And finally, just on this question of joint industrialization, yes, that's exactly what we want, and joint prosperity. But there's a stage before that and parallel to it. So the Lancet produced a report just a few weeks ago which showed that US aid pulling out of overseas development assistance will lead to 14 million additional deaths by 2030. 14 million additional deaths by 2030. So clearly ODA has a major role to play in parallel to the project that we've been discussing today around joint industrialization.
And those are
for me, that's the key issue we will try to discuss over the next couple, when we develop the Global Europe instrument as part of the multi-annual financial framework, and as we develop our opinions around Global Gateway in the next few years.
Thanks for looking forward for us. And of course, these are just such sobering figures. We talk about Europe as predictability, as a more predictable partner, and you mentioned that maybe this is a time that Europe has something even more to offer on that front, given that there's such unpredictability in the world more broadly. Jorge Moreira da Silva, would you give us your last thoughts here? You can respond to some of those questions, or you can just give us your final...
Well, especially on the idea what is needed, not just on the Global Gateway, but more broadly. I would say, for instance, based on our experience partnering with Global Gateway on implementation of a project in South Sudan to enable the trade with Uganda, and a project in Sierra Leone for mini-grids, microgrids with solar. I think that a key element here is to integrate even further on Global Gateway this idea of technical assistance, project management, project preparation. If you have time, I would invite you to check our website at UNOPS. We just launched this week a publication on the capacity or implementation gap. So what is needed to go further. The second point is about fragility. 80% of the people under poverty will live in fragile context by 2030. There is a high concentration of climate impacts, conflict, poverty, exactly in the same places. I think that we need to, I wouldn't say prioritize, but I think that definitely we need to bring all efforts, namely ODA. I totally agree that ODA, if there is a moment where we need more ODA, it's now.
Right.
But to make fragility and prevention the key element of the whole agenda on development.
Commissioner, in 30 seconds, you wanted to talk about your vision for the future. Can you manage it? It's a communication challenge.
In 30 seconds, I cannot. Give me 1 minute at least.
Okay, you're a tough
somebody
negotiator.
was asking where I see the future, and I proposed an option. The multilateralism, the rule of law, business without the barriers, and collaboration based on the mutual benefits. This is how I see the world, and other things I said that there are some very dystopic forecasts. But if I would know, I would become very rich, and I still feel more as an economist than as a politiker. And if you look on the history of the Nobel Prize for Economy, usually they were awarded for analyzing, describing, and explaining issues happening in the past.
Right.
And there are guys which were extremely wrong. I'm thinking about the Paul Krugman after Lehman's collapse, describing the Central and Eastern Europe as Argentina on Danube and predicting them a basically very dark future. I was promoting this region as one of the most promising in the world, and I was right, and he never gave the Nobel Prize back.
You can start a petition.
But you know, with the policy of powers and with more Taleb's black swans, we were used to have this 10-year cycle, recession, crisis, and then growth. But
okay.
Then it was overdue. It was longer, 13 years, and then COVID and war and energy crisis came. So there are much more black swans, much more extraordinary events which will impact the macroeconomic growth. But there is one thing which is important. When you look on the World Economic Forum in Davos, climate events, climate change, when it comes to global risk, and this is the alignment of the best economists of this planet, are moving to the top of the chart. And therefore, basically, the idea behind the Global Gateway to continue to fight against the climate change, I think, is a very, very right one. And I hope that what I'm usually saying to my colleagues, I'm not always right, but I'm never wrong, is a right quotation.
So thank you so much. That we've spent a good amount of time there really digging into some of these issues about trying to make partnerships more strategic. And I think you'll all agree that we've just only scratched the surface. So of course I invite you to continue these conversations for the rest of the day, for the rest of the forum, and of course take the connections that you meet here and put them into practice in future. Now, I would like to start by asking you to give a round of applause for the organisers, the interpreters, and the technical staff that made this first panel happen. Could you give a round of applause, please? And of course, above all, please give a warm round of applause for our panelists here who've shared so many of their insights this morning. So you're now invited to a coffee break, and there is an exhibition with interactive screens that you're very welcome to go and take a look at to explore some more of these projects. Thank you very much for your time, for your attention, and your questions. I've been your host, Rosie Burchard, and good luck for the rest of the day, day 2 of this Global Gateway Forum. Thank you.